10,000 BC, two men are sitting by a fire somewhere in what is now Sicily. Nobody knows their names, nobody recorded what they felt, but archaeologists found what they left behind: cave drawings, two male figures, together, not hunting, not fighting, just together. That cave is called Grotta del Genovese. It's been there for 12,000 years. The oldest visual record humans ever made includes this. And here's what's strange about it. Neither of those men had a word for what they were. No concept, no category, no framework to understand it or explain it to anyone else. They just existed. For most of human history, same-sex attraction wasn't a scandal, a sin, or an identity. It was just part of the human experience. And the story of how the world's understanding of that changed completely, multiple times, is one of the strangest journeys in recorded history. Egypt, 2400 BC. Two men are working in the royal court of Pharaoh Nusser. Their names are Neanderthals and Khnumhotep. They serve as the pharaoh's personal attendants, one of the most prestigious positions in the entire civilization. By every account that survives, they are inseparable. And when they die, they are buried in the same tomb, with inscriptions dedicating it to both of them jointly. In Egyptian custom, men of their rank were buried with their wives and families. Neanderthals and Khnumhotep were not. The artwork inside shows them facing each other, touching foreheads, in the same pose used in every other tomb of that era, but only between a husband and wife. Egyptologists have debated the nature of their bond for decades. The archaeology doesn't give a definitive answer, but it does raise a question that nobody who studies that tomb can quite shake. Rome, 50 BC. Most people assume Rome was conservative about this. It wasn't. But the reason is completely different from what you'd expect. Ancient Romans didn't have the concept of gay or straight. The only thing Romans cared about was social hierarchy. Who was dominant? Who had power? Who held status? A Roman man's reputation depended entirely on whether he was in control, in politics, in war, in every aspect of life. Julius Caesar was openly rumored to have had a relationship with King Nicomedes of Bithynia. His political enemies used it against him in speeches. He responded by going on to conquer Gaul. 2 centuries later, Emperor Hadrian would travel the empire with his companion Antinous, a young Greek man, barely 20 years old. In 130 AD, sailing the Nile together, Antinous drowned. Nobody knows exactly how. The ancient sources are deliberately vague. Accident, sacrifice, mystery, never solved. Hadrian wept openly. Roman historians noted this with shock. Emperors did not weep in public. He declared Antinous an official god of the Roman Empire, built temples across every province, founded a city in Egypt at the exact location where Antinous died, and named it after him. More statues of Antinous survive today than of almost any Roman emperor. The most powerful man in the world built a religion out of his grief. And Rome didn't find that strange. Rome found it appropriate. Historians still debate whether Antinous was the most memorialized private individual in all of ancient history. The Roman framework for this was so different from ours that historians today struggle to even describe it using modern language. Greece, Thebes, 378 BC. A general is assembling what will become the most elite military unit in the ancient world. He doesn't pick the strongest soldiers. He doesn't pick the fastest. He builds his unit around one idea: that men fight harder to protect someone they deeply care about than they do to protect a stranger. The unit becomes known as the Sacred Band of Thebes. 300 men, paired together, fighting side by side. For 33 years, they are undefeated. Every army that faces them loses. The historian Plutarch wrote about them. He didn't treat it as remarkable. He treated it as obvious. Of course they fought that way. Of course they never retreated. A man will die before he shows weakness in front of someone he loves. They are only ever beaten by Alexander the Great. And when Alexander walks the battlefield after, he finds all 300 of them dead, in formation. None had retreated. None had run. Alexander the Great, conqueror of the known world, reportedly wept. He had studied warfare his entire life. He had defeated every army, every strategy, every formation the ancient world had ever produced. But standing over those 300 men, he understood something. These weren't soldiers who had fought because they were ordered to. They had fought because walking away meant leaving behind the one person they could not leave behind. He had never seen that before. Nobody had. That's not a footnote in history. That's one of the greatest military stories ever told. But none of what we've covered so far is the most surprising part. Because everything we've talked about, Egypt, Rome, Greece, it's all Mediterranean. All Western. What happened on the other side of the world followed completely different rules. China, 7 BC. Emperor Ai rules over the most powerful empire on Earth. One morning, he wakes up. His sleeve is trapped under the arm of his sleeping companion, a man named Dong Xian, who Emperor Ai had appointed as his highest-ranking official in court. He doesn't want to wake him, so he picks up a knife and cuts off his own sleeve. The story spreads immediately across the empire. The passion of the cut sleeve becomes a Chinese literary term that survives for 2,000 years. Writers were still referencing it 500 years after the emperor died. It entered the language so completely that people used it without even knowing where it came from. Historians find that Emperor Ai was far from unusual. All 10 emperors of the first 2 centuries of the Han dynasty had official male companions listed in court records. Not hidden, not secret, official, documented, part of the historical record. Japan, 13th century. Among the samurai, the most disciplined warrior class in Japanese history, there exists a tradition called Shudo, the way of the young. Close bonds between senior and junior warriors were considered a mark of honor. Poets wrote about it. Philosophers discussed it. The Hagakure, the definitive text on samurai ethics, addresses it directly, treating these bonds as expressions of loyalty and discipline. Buddhist monasteries held similar traditions across the country. When the first Christian missionaries arrived in Japan in the 16th century, they were horrified. They wrote detailed letters back to Europe documenting what they saw, not as a marginal practice, but as something woven into the fabric of Japanese society at every level. This was written into the culture everywhere. It lasts for nearly 1,000 years. It begins to disappear in 1867, when Japan opens its borders to the West. And with Western trade comes Western Christianity. And with Western Christianity comes a completely different framework. Within a single generation, a tradition that had lasted 1,000 years is gone. Which brings us to the twist. The word homosexual was invented in 1869 by a German doctor named Karl Maria Kurtbeny. He coined it. He made it up. And here's the part that almost nobody talks about. He invented the word heterosexual at the exact same time. Both words. Same year, same man, same document. Before 1869, neither word existed in any language on Earth. Within 50 years of that document, both words had spread into legal codes, medical textbooks, and criminal laws across Europe and the Americas. A framework that didn't exist in 1868 was, by 1920, shaping how governments, doctors, and courts treated millions of people. Which means the categories we use today to understand human attraction, gay, straight, are both less than 200 years old. And then for all of human history before that, for every civilization we just talked about, there were no labels, no categories, no identities. The ancient world didn't ask whether you were gay or straight. It asked whether you had power or you didn't, whether you followed the customs of your culture or you didn't. The entire framework we use today, all of it, was assembled less than 200 years ago, which means the 2 men by the fire in Sicily, the Egyptian officials buried in the same tomb, the Roman general, the emperor who cut his sleeve, the samurai. None of them would have recognized the labels we'd give them today. They just lived. And maybe that's the most unsettling part of all this. Not what the ancient world did, but how fast a single document from 1869 changed the way the entire modern world thinks about it. Every framework humans have ever built for understanding each other, every category, every label, every definition, has eventually been replaced by a different one. The ancient world had its own. We have ours. The question is whether any of them ever fully captured what was actually happening between people. So here's the question worth sitting with. Did the ancient world understand something about human nature that we've since complicated? Or did we finally find the language to describe something that was always there? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if this surprised you, the next one gets even stranger.